Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Jay Wolfgang Goerlich joins us today. I can't read my own writing. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
And now that I've stumbled over my tongue, I forgot to say that you were Advisory CISO at Cisco and also in IAN's faculty. So I'm happy to have you aboard.
That I am.
Okay, now that I've stumbled through that, would like to. I'm sorry. It gets a little bit. This is like it's always like the easier names that I have a problem with. Um, so thank you first of all for joining us. You are actually joining us from not where you're at, but from a kind of a small conference out somewhere in the West area, right?
Yeah, it's this. I think it may have a future. There's a few people. We're out in the city, Las Vegas.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple people have, and so it's an interesting atmosphere out here among all the hackers and security professionals.
Well, the only thing I can say with regards to that is never split tens and always split eights. So, well, thank you again. Can you give us like a just an overview of like how you got started into cybersecurity, why you got started, and where you're at today, what you're doing as far as the advisory CISO for Cisco?
Sure, I got started in the '90s. The movie Hackers was still in theaters when I landed my first role in healthcare. And I used to say that as a grounding point, like I started when hackers started. And these days, as I do mentoring and coaching of younger people, more and more folks are like, "Oh, I don't watch like old movies from the last century." Like, ah! We actually had a viewing party recently for one of our 23-year-olds, and I walked them through the movie. So I started off in healthcare, and I started off at a time where, if you looked like an IT guy, if you could, string together the right words, and if you were smart enough, fast enough, and coherent enough, you too could have a promising career. It was not this must have a master's degree and 10 years of experience before you could touch a keyboard. They were like, oh, you graduated high school. Why not run our IT?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very privileged to get a lot of access from writing code to building systems to running cables to sitting in the leadership meetings early on. From there, I've had a series of leadership positions in consulting firms and at a money management firm. And yes, today I'm on the advisory side. And what I really focus in on is how do we make cybersecurity real? Now, I don't mean like, hey, how do I buy a product? We can all buy products. I don't necessarily mean like, hey, how do I, make sure that I'm doing some of the basics like do multi-factor, do patching? Yes, please do those things. But I mean like, how do we make it a real program? How do we engage others in the business? How do we reach across the aisle? How do we educate? How do we go from awareness to action? Those are the types of conversations I have with security leaders globally on a weekly basis.
So you mentioned the early days, and it got me thinking a little bit about it as well. But you're right. It's like when you first started out in IT, there wasn't a strict set of requirements, and there really wasn't a limit as to who you could talk to. Because I started a little bit before you. I started in '89. I was a student assistant at the university that I was going to school at, and a wonderful place to learn everything IT. If you even today just work at a university, because you're exposed to a lot of stuff. But yeah, everything from running cables to making cables to configuring end stations, and I got a chance even back then. I mean, to talk with the CIO and all of that. He would ask, and maybe it was just one of those instances where he was more interested in stuff than other ones were, but would just ask us like, hey, how's the network doing today? And it kind of made me feel really comfortable. And it has gotten to be a little bit more structured, wouldn't you say, in the last like 20, 25, 30 years?
It has, and I think that can sort of take the joy out of it. I think the structure is certainly problematic when we think about raising people up and accelerating their careers. The other thing is that many people got into it in the 80s and 90s and early aughts because we were just so passionate about it. We wanted to know, how do these things work and how can I break them? And when other people break them, how can I detect that and respond to that? In recent years, I've actually I call it like the crisis of the junior employee, because they were told there's money in IT and IT security. They were told cyber is a great career. They get in, and then they're like, "Well, what does this have to do with my values? Why am I even here?" so,
Yeah.
so that we've lost something, I think, as our field has shifted from the Wild West to a little bit more of a profession.
Maybe what we lost is the fact that people are entering it for the money. Because when I started, it was not really considered a lucrative career field. It was actually more or less like an extension of like running phone cables, basically, I guess, at the time, networking. It's like, and there wasn't the promise of a lot of money there, but it is interesting to see how it's all evolved over time. But now you're doing the advisory CISO work. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in just a moment, and ask you, what do you think is the most significant threat or threats in cyber to small and mid-sized businesses today? And I will ask you that question, give you 30 seconds to think about it. vCISO Catalyst is the ultimate community for cybersecurity specialists who believe in collaborating to strengthen the security of small to mid-sized businesses. Join the vCISO Catalyst today and be part of a community that shares your passion for cybersecurity, knowledge, and professional growth. Together, we can create a safer world for everyone. Visit our website at www.vcisocatalyst.org and start your journey with vCISO Catalyst today. All right, you've had 30 seconds to think about that really complicated question. What do you think is the most significant threat to small and mid-sized businesses today as far as cybersecurity goes?
This goes hand in hand with two aspects of being in small business. First is, we know in small business it's very difficult to get funding. It's very difficult to get top talent. I was looking at a study that came out last year that found slightly over half of SMBs are paying less than $2,000 a month in cybersecurity.
Wow.
So how do you get a security team out of that? How do you get good tools out of that? Part of this is being countered by, we just saw vCISO Catalyst. So part of this is being countered by the virtual and the fractional CISOs, who are doing a fantastic job sort of bringing that top tier knowledge in. Mm-hmm. But there is a really severe underinvestment in the space. It's what my friend and colleague Wendy Nather coined as the security poverty line, a line beneath which you just don't have the resources to combat threats. And that exacerbates a lot of common threats, like a business email compromise, annoyance for most organizations, could very rapidly, and I've been on the side of helping companies recover from exactly what I'm talking about, can very rapidly in an SMB lead to financial compromise or supply chain compromise, where they're transferring funds out or they're setting up false supplier websites and phishing people that way. So think about malware, right? Really annoyance for all of us. I think there's something like 700,000 new malware samples every year is the latest I've heard. Back to the 90s when there was 10 and we all could name them, and many of us had them on floppy drives.
Yeah. So what's a floppy drive? Some people are asking right now.
Watch the movie Hackers, then we'll talk. The reality is that if you don't have good endpoint detection response, if you don't have patching, if you don't have good device controls, a small, simple malware infection can very quickly become a business crippling ransomware event. So what I think is the biggest risk to SMBs is the inability to combat threats that other organizations can simply shake off.
And what do you think is the solution for that? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a monetary thing? Is it kind of a combination of both, or something else?
On the culture side, here's some good news. One of the things that my team is involved with is a security outcomes report. We look at 5,000 organizations globally, all different sizes, all different industries, and we say, what are you doing and what outcomes are you getting? And we do a correlation to that so we can help surface what's really important. What I was incredibly impressed by out of a recent security outcomes report is they found that SMBs were more likely to be aligned with the business, to have good relationships with the executive team. I think that makes sense too. If you're 100, 200, 500 person company, it's much easier to spend time with the CEO and understand the direction and be in those leadership meetings.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
I think the culture is good. At least that's what the data shows. The culture in an SMB gives you an advantage. What I do think needs to happen is there does need to be more investment. There does need to be more funds allocated to cybersecurity. That can be driven through a number of different ways, but I think that's one. And secondly, across the board, from people who are providing services to people who are providing software, to people who are helping manage it all, we need to be lowering those cost points of entry, and we need to be better structuring our offerings, right? We need to, as they used to say, democratize cybersecurity.
So I know you mentioned, I'm going to touch on a few points there. First of all, you mentioned the virtual CISO, and virtual CISO is great. And I mean, I'm one. But sometimes small, mid-sized businesses might think that, well, I get a virtual CISO in and then my problems are solved. Well, that's not going to be the case, because the virtual CISO is just going to be there to do what a CISO does. And that's advisory. That's to kind of shepherd things. But you still need to have, as you say, number two, those tools in place, because you need visibility. The virtual CISO can help to identify the tools and identify the correct reports, interpret the reports, and then translate it into risk, into business terms and all that. But you need to have some sort of information there. But then number three, which I think is maybe the most important one of this, that a lot of times businesses don't address, is that you need somebody to run these things. And you can't just buy a black box, put it in your network or put it in your infrastructure or what have you, and then you're done with security. And unfortunately, that sort of mindset, I think, started with the firewall back 25 years ago. It's like you put a firewall in, you're protected from everything, no problem whatsoever. And then, but the black box doesn't work. So would you agree, or would you add to that triad of issues to address? Is there something else that I missed there?
I would add one more issue,
Okay.
but I think you're spot on. I think what I like about fractional and virtual CISOs is you can get very skilled, very talented, top level strategic thinkers involved in helping. I think that's priceless. Right now, in one of my nonprofits, we're actually working with a virtual CMO, and it's the same thing. It's fantastic, but I still need the back end tools. I still need the people to run it. The allocating of staff is an interesting one. This is an area where, are we going to make someone a dedicated security person, or are we going to spread those tasks across multiple folks? We all wear so many hats when we're in a smaller organization. So I do think there is some very real opportunities for some nice knowledge transfer and some guidance going from the virtual and fractional CISO to the staff who's actually responsible for operating the tools. I would add one additional thing to what you said, which is, and I'd actually love to hear your opinion on this, cyber insurance. Some of the stats that I'm seeing, and I just did a webinar this week where we posed the question, and it was largely an SMB audience, is 1 in 4 organizations don't know about it, don't use it, don't invest in it. And, it's similar to driving your car around. You may have a great car, you may have a great mechanic, but we're all going to get in an accident one day. What is your escape hatch?
Cyber insurance, I think, sometimes is used as a crutch. It seems like small businesses say, well, if something happens, it'll be covered by insurance. Well, that's a very bad approach, because first of all, read your policy, see what it covers and see what it doesn't. But also, there's more of a movement within the cyber insurance industry to, instead of sending like a 10-question survey about your security program, check the box, do you have this? Yes. There's more eyes on the SMB security program before they'll even underwrite you, which I think is great. It's another, just like compliance has forced some businesses and some verticals to think more seriously about security. so has now cyber insurance for more businesses, because they need to have that in order to remain in business. These are the businesses that recognize that they need cyber insurance. For those that don't think they need it, I don't know what you can do to help them, because that's a fundamental business question, not a technology question. It's like, if you don't understand the risks of your organization, if you don't understand why you need to have your brake shoes fixed or whatever, then I don't know what can help you. I agree, and I'm a little upset with myself that I didn't think about that fourth pillar there, but it's an evolving field. I think we're going to see some more significant changes in the next 2 or 3 years because it's maturing. So, did I answer your question?
I think so.
I'm not used to being asked questions here. That's not the way this is supposed to work. So, no, it is. It's a conversation, and it's never about asking questions back and forth. Well, I don't know what the right answer is. It seems like that in the virtual CISO field, a lot of the folks that come to talk to us, and you might see some of the same as an advisory CISO, is people that are not being proactive. They're just trying to solve an immediate problem. They were dinged or what have you. That was common maybe a couple years ago, but nowadays it seems like that there's more of a push to do something proactively. And so from that aspect, I'm feeling at least a little bit better. So are you seeing that?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's the mentality that I would see in 2010 was, we're too small. No one will mess with us. I think we've moved past that. Unfortunately, it was very painful to move past that. There's a reason we moved past that. There's been a lot of impacts and a lot of organizations, a lot of lives. But I think as a society, we've come to realize the importance of cybersecurity.
Well, cyber can certainly be very stressful as a practitioner. I've been doing it in one way, shape, or form for, like I said, more than 30 years. And one of the things I realized early on is that you need to have some method to decompress. And then one of the things I realized after that was that the method to decompress probably should be more of the healthier options than some of the unhealthy options. So my question to you is, what is one or two things that you do to help get away from the stress of cyber and just decompress and refresh?
So I love to travel, and I'm fortunate that my job allows me to travel quite a bit. So I am usually taking that work-life balance on the road. Wherever I am, I always take a moment to see the sights, smell the air, touch the grass, experience the local cuisine. I'm not always the best at it, though. I think if you were to ask my wife, she'd probably rat me out. We were in the foothills of northern Italy this spring. Beautiful night, beautiful Italian night. We're at this boutique hotel. Elderly husband and wife running it. And if you've stayed in that area, they bring out in the morning fresh breakfast and everything. And it was just so romantic and so peaceful. And I sent my wife to her room, and I got another room, and I spent the evening doing a SANS exam.
No.
So I failed. I guess what I would say is I travel, but what I'm constantly doing is trying to find that balance and make sure that I'm recharging and unplugging. It's not easy.
No, it isn't. And particularly, I can say as being a small business owner, it's like it seems like it's harder for me to turn things off because you work almost like it seems like 24/7. But fortunately, at the very least, it's like if I want to take an hour walk in the middle of the day, my boss isn't going to care. So that works out pretty well. Well, what are your future plans? Traveling anywhere or future career plans?
Well, I don't know that I've got a future career plan. I've got plenty of travel, but I would quickly exhaust your audience. One of the things that I'm working on right now is if we go back to how we felt in the beginning of cybersecurity, if we go back to our goal to eke out more privacy, to create more freedom, to explore this Wild West, that sort of like punk mentality, I say in a button down in a hotel room. that sort of punk mentality. I sometimes feel like we lost that. One of the things that I've been doing, and I see a lot of my peers doing it as well, is reaching out to other areas that need cybersecurity awareness, that need training, that need support, and volunteering.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working with a group called Securing Sexuality. It's a conference that we're going to be doing in Detroit in October. And what we're looking at is how do you protect just relationships, right? Finding someone, dating, getting married, that whole sector of relationships, figuring out who you are and who you want to love and who you want to be with. And how do we help those people in this day and age when it seems like everything can be tracked and leaked and doxed?
Yeah.
How do we help those people, navigate that and protect themselves? That's what I'm working on near term.
Well, that sounds like a great passion. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So, well, thank you, J. Wolfgang is the way that you like to be addressed, right?
Wolfgang's fine. It was a pleasure meeting with you, Greg.
Pleasure meeting with you too. And everybody, stay secure.